This session is the title of the session is Health Security and the Global Vaccine Supply Chain. So our topic is focused on the global health and global vaccine supply chain. We have experienced COVID-19 for the past few years. The disease actually claimed many lives, almost 7 million, maybe more than that. And its impact on economy, on democracy, on public health, of course, and on food security, on governance, political governance. It is huge, and many experts, including experts here, say that it will come back for years to come. So the whole world and also individual countries need to prepare. And in preparing the next rounds of infectious disease, one key element is vaccines. We are talking about vaccines and how to manage global, vaccine production lines, etc. So, we in this session we will discuss how countries responded to, vaccine, provision and vaccine supply, and we focus on China, India, and other countries. And second, we want to discuss global vaccine governance or global health governance broadly. And the key issue as a think tank, a policy think tank, East Asia Institute, we really want to know how to explore how to improve global vaccine supply chains and how to improve global health governance in the years to come. So with those topics in mind, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have three distinguished experts. From on my left, Dr. Huang Yanzhong, Senior Fellow, the Council on Foreign Relations. And next is Professor Sunyoung Kim, Seoul National University, and Professor Taekyoon Kim, also from Seoul National University. After three presentations from these three scholars, we turn to discussion. And discussion will be in this order, starting from Professor Kang Sonju Kang, Korea National Diplomatic Academy, and move to Dr. Man-gi Song from International Vaccine Institute, and last but least, Professor Jang Hae-young from Chungang University, Seoul, Korea. We have a mix of political scientists and real scientists. So it'll be a very interesting discussion. We are fake political scientists, fake scientists in today's term. Professor Huang, why don't you start?
Well, thank you, Professor Sung, for inviting me to this conference. I remember 2 years ago, I was in Seoul attending the World Emerging Threat Forum hosted by the Minister of Foreign Affairs here. That was one of the first in-person conferences I attended since the beginning of the pandemic. At that time, there were a few people at the airport. I had to take the PCR test, and in fact, I had to stay in the hotel room before the test results were available. Everybody on the street, were wearing masks. And now the acute stage of the pandemic is over, but the shadow of COVID is indeed long. We still have, some here still wearing masks, right? And if you look at China, what this conspiratory disease outbreak, I'm sorry, not respiratory. Respiratory disease outbreak. In the country, but the National Health Commission just yesterday, they issued new guidelines on masking. That remind us, that the looming threat of another pandemic, right? So the question is, that if indeed another pandemic hits now, can we do better, right? And given China's involvement in the COVID pandemic, it is worth asking, right, the question, would the results be any different if a similar, novel, dangerous pathogen, with pandemic potential occurred in the country again? So I'm asked to talk about 3 issues. The first is the future of China's zero COVID policy. And the second is the global vaccine supply chain challenges and China's role. And the third, the COVID pandemic and U.S.-China strategic competition. I'm going to start with the first question, right? The China's zero COVID policy. We know, right, that the zero COVID policy, with all its miracles and follies, right, that they have essentially traumatized China's economy and society, reversed the gains accumulated for the first 1.5 years of pandemic response. But looking back, it also provides proof concept for a surveillance state in China, right? If you look at, right, the post-COVID era, that China abolished the itinerary codes, but not the health code, because the health code used to assess the individual's risk level, based on their travel history, residence, and medical records. They still stockpiled, the massive data set on such information. And indeed, this lack of strong public resistance and government's ongoing efforts to enhance infrastructural and organization of the digital governance in the post-COVID era seems to suggest that this surveillance state is here to stay, right? The health codes evolved into service codes in certain localities in China to facilitate people's dealing with the government agencies. And on December 1st, last week, right, they reactivated the health code in many provinces in response to this respiratory diseases outbreaks in the country. And also, if you look at the draft of the revised infectious disease law in China, it appears to legitimize many aspects of the zero COVID policy. These key zero COVID measures, including quarantines, lockdowns, PCR testing, health codes, are included in the proposed amendment. And also, right, just I think last week, the PCR testing on inbound travelers were reintroduced in some Chinese airports. So it's not so difficult to envision that if China is faced with a new dangerous pathogen, they might easily revive, this surveillance apparatus, relying heavily on these non-pharmaceutical measures, to identify, track, quarantine, and isolate carriers and their close contacts. So that is my first prediction. The second is on global vaccine supply chain. We know that one of the main challenges in the global vaccine supply chain during the pandemic was the inequality in vaccine distribution, which can be viewed as a structural component or consequences of this uneven R&D and manufacturing capacities, especially between the global north and the south. But we know that the vaccine nationalism also played a crucial role. Wealthy countries stockpiled vaccines that left poor nations struggling for access. Actions by some countries like China, like U.S. and India, they imposed export bans, imposed restrictions on vaccines and ingredients to prioritize their own populations. They make the situation even worse. And there's certainly the IP, the intellectual property rights issue. Even though the pandemic met the criteria for the TRIPS waiver under WTO, took nearly 2 years for WTO members to agree on limited terms for COVID-19 vaccine waiver. But here it also highlights the importance of China, actually the importance to engage China. In early 2020, China was the first to develop a COVID-19 vaccine. And until 2021, it was the world's biggest COVID vaccine exporter. China also collaborated with some developing countries to enhance their vaccine production capacities. In that sense, they helped mitigate the global vaccine apartheid. But in the meantime, we know that the Chinese vaccines are not, as the leaders claim, the global public goods. In fact, 15% of their vaccines, delivered globally, actually, for donation. 85% are for commercial sale. Chinese vaccines are clearly less effective in dealing with the highly transmissible variants, compared with the mRNA vaccines. They also use the APIs, the active pharmaceutical ingredients, they threaten to weaponize the APIs during the pandemic, potentially a risk factor for the global vaccine supply chain. They practiced vaccine diplomacy that invited U.S. countermeasures, further exacerbating the inequality issue. So what are the solutions to the problem? I think given the vast R&D and manufacturing capacity of China, it should be allowed to play a significant role in the future of global vaccine supply chain. There's several I think the proposed actions. The first, I think we should consider developing new consensus, partnerships, collaboration mechanisms for technological transfer and R&D. And secondly, I think OECD countries, including Korea, should boast this compulsory license provisions at the WHO, including by encouraging by China to use the flexibilities afforded by the Doha Declaration on TRIPS and public health. And third, I think China should be encouraged to integrate its bilateral health assistance into a COVAX-like multilateral framework. Finally, the geopolitical considerations. The question here is, how likely is the prospect of cooperation between China and the U.S., the two geopolitical rivals? If you look at the COVID pandemic, three problems. The first is that during the COVID pandemic, ideological competition for the first time was introduced into the pandemic response. But as Professor Ha pointed out, this competition for legitimacy, right? Both countries try to frame this as a competition between authoritarianism and liberal democracy, right? The second problem is politicization of the pandemic's origin issue, right? There was all these allegations, conspiracy theories, right? U.S. and China became entangled in a vortex of suspicion, disinformation, and diplomatic disputes that politicize the scientific quest for the pandemic's origins. And in the United States, this perception of China as the pandemic's origin by its initial missteps, disruption to the global supply chain, fueled this cause among politicians in the country for a hard decoupling from China. And the third problem is securitization of pandemic response, right? Concerns about the dependency on Chinese pharmaceuticals, for example, spurred the U.S. to diversify its sources to allies and friendly countries, right? We call it, friendly showing, right? Also might encourage the U.S. to bring some production back home, increase stockpiles, and the mask and vaccine diplomacy, right? Both countries, they sought to use the provision of vaccines and medical supplies to compete for strategic influence. So in the post-Cold War era, you would expect, right, that they would, sort of pursue a global health détente, right? But that didn't happen, right? There is a lack of interest, right, in cooperation over global health security, right? We saw, right, during the Biden and Xi summit in San Francisco, right, health security was not a key topic there, right? In the U.S., right, COVID-19's link to China remains politicized, right? The Biden administration seems to be very reluctant, right, to step out of this comfort zone, right? We cooperating only with like-minded countries, right, and to reach out to geopolitical rival like China. But paradoxically, I think China's stringent zero-COVID policy has slowed its economy, right? And if you look at all this, revised, forecast about China's GDP growth in the long run, right, suggested that it may take much longer for China to overpass, to overtake the U.S. by this number one, the economic power status, right? And the survey data also indicate that China's limited effectiveness in gaining the lasting soft power or substantial clout during the pandemic. So even though it is premature to declare China's ascent at its peak, especially as the United States is facing the similar internal, domestic challenges, right? The China's trajectory to a power on par with the United States is likely to be very prolonged, But in the meantime, this altered, power dynamics, might shape both countries' strategic preferences and choices, and hopefully, this, might generate additional incentives, right, for both countries to work together, right, in pandemic prevention and preparedness. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Huang. Very interesting presentation. You seem to be critical of China's behavior during the COVID as the world's largest vaccine manufacturer. On facade, the country, the leader talked about vaccine as public goods, but actually you said that only 15% are provided, maybe categorized as public goods, but overwhelmingly it is very much strategic, mercantilist. So that's the point. And second, nonetheless, in the future, we need to engage China, and you provide several ways to engage. And it's actually the suggestions for the Chinese government as well. And finally, implications for U.S.-China strategic competition. So thank you very much. And let's turn to Professor Kim Sun-young, please. By the way, I forgot to mention this. Presenters have 15 minutes and discussants maybe 8 to 10 minutes for your discussion. Okay, please go ahead.
I'm Sun-young Kim from Seoul National University. My specialty is global health policy. So I'm very honored. I feel honored to be invited to give a talk on these very important topics. The global vaccine supply chain after the COVID-19 pandemic. So the title of my talk says that I will talk about prospects and challenges for Korea from the global health security perspective. But as you will see, the role of Korea, the weight given to the role of Korea is not that broad, actually. And then I want to talk about this issue of global vaccine supply chain. Basically, why it is very important to develop the global vaccine supply chain during this inter-pandemic period through global level efforts, not by one country. But still, I think the Korea has its role, and I hope the Korea has the leading role in advancing global health in the Asian region. So, okay, this is the very rough overview of my talk, and then I'd like to start by reviewing the very basic concept of global health security. Yeah, okay. So I think that all of the audiences already know what health security means and what global health security means. But let me just very briefly review because I think this the conceptualization of the global health security is very important and actually the motivation of this talk. As you know, the health security is a field within human security with 6 other components suggested by the UNDP in 1994. That is, the concept emerged after the Cold War. The human security concept encompasses activities and measures that take place across national borders to mitigate all kinds of public health threats to ensure the health of all the people. Example of the public health threats include infectious diseases, antimicrobial resistance, foodborne diseases, chemical accidents, nuclear accidents, and environmental diseases. I actually want to emphasize the public health the threats, because one of the myths during the pandemic was that the health security is seeking measures against infectious diseases, but as many of you already know, that it's not. So the health security and global health security includes the several various types of threats, and then of course including infectious disease threats. But that is only one type of public health threats. So COVID-19 came with the infectious disease pathogen, but the next public health emergency or crisis might have the different type of threats. Okay, the global health security refers to the shared responsibility that requires a coordinated effort from countries around the world to protect the health of all people. But again, I'd like to highlight the definition by WHO. That is, the WHO defines global health security as activities to protect the health of all people that encompasses both preventive and reactive aspects to minimize the risk and impact of acute public health events that endanger people across the geographic region and national borders. With rapid globalization, the mobility of people and goods has increased, and economic interdependence has grown. As a result, among the various types of global health security threats, infectious disease-related threats are becoming increasingly important in terms of frequency and scale. Okay. So up to here, I'd like to very briefly overview the original concept and definition of global health security, and then I want to move to very briefly the review the importance of vaccines in the context of global health security. We almost all of us agree, I think, that vaccines, beyond their health and life-saving benefits against vaccine-preventable infectious diseases, can also yield societal benefits in terms of global economy and security, particularly during a pandemic or outbreaks. Then now let's move to overview the characteristics or main features of vaccine, the supply chains. Before we delve into the specific characteristics of vaccine supply chains, let's briefly review the general supply chains, the concepts. Generally, supply chains are networks of organizations and business processes that collaborate, that work together to deliver a product or service from its inception to the end user. They connect suppliers, manufacturers, warehouses, retailers, and customers, facilitating the flow of products and services from source to consumption. In the supply chains, materials, information, and payment flow in both directions. Supply chains represent very complex systems that can be challenging to manage. However, it is essential for businesses or industries to effectively manage their supply chains in order to be successful. Effective management of supply chains is crucial for businesses to enhance efficiency, reduce costs, and boost customer satisfaction. So similarly or analogously, we can imagine that vaccine supply chains can be thought of as the organization and processes that are used to develop, produce, distribute, and administer vaccines. Vaccine supply chains are equally complex, necessitate meticulous planning, coordination, and collaboration between various stakeholders. And the stakeholders of vaccine supply chains include suppliers, manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers, immunization providers, and public health agencies. Here, you can see the slight differences between general supply chains and vaccine supply chains. With the vaccine supply chains, actually, the very last two steps, which are immunization providers and the public health agencies' roles are very, very important, and they are particularly critical in less developed countries. However, which should be noted that vaccine supply chains have some characteristics that differ from the general supply chains. The first difference is that vaccine supply chains requires very rigorous safety and quality controls. I guess you might have heard a lot from the multinational manufacturing, the pharmaceutical companies, that the R&D costs of the pharmaceuticals, including vaccines, are particularly high due to rigorous safety and quality control. But this is a... Okay, yeah. Okay. I will wrap up very briefly. The main difference of vaccine supply chains include difficulty in forecasting and planning for production and distribution, and limited number of vaccine developers and producers, and long distribution chains, and strict regulation and certification, and the need for public education and campaigns. The next is the need for a data management system. The last is the need for the international cooperation. But still, I think some of the differences may overlap with the characteristics of the general supply chains. Then let's think about why vaccine supply chains matter. That's because while many people or scholars say that the vaccines are public goods, I think actually the vaccine supply chains can be public goods. Fulfilling the requirements of non-rivalry and non-exclusiveness. Because the vaccine's pivotal role is well known, we can also easily imagine the very crucial role of vaccine supply chains to produce the vaccines and deliver them effectively and efficiently. I want to highlight on one thing. Currently, the discussions among governments is going on to develop a pandemic treaty. And then the global supply chain of pandemic-related products has emerged as one of the key issues in agreeing with the pandemic treaty. Okay, so the next, I want to briefly mention the current challenges with the global vaccine supply chains. So to name just a few, I can list the production capacity and distribution inequalities. The second, the raw material and supply shortages. Third, regulatory and bureaucratic hurdles. Fourth, the lack of funding and investment. And the fifth in my list is vaccine hesitancy and misinformation. But these are just only a part of the challenges the current global vaccine supply chains face. So to address these challenges, we will require a multi-pronged approach. Let me just wrap up my talk in 1 minute. I'm sorry for using 1 more minute. Okay, the next I wanted to mention that how the global supply chains have been realigned after the COVID-19 pandemic. So, for example, the regionalization of supply chains, diversification of supply chains, and digitalization of supply chains can be the main realignment characteristics. Finally, the organizer of this session wanted me to think about the challenges and the tasks for Korea. I think that Korea has world-class competitiveness in the field of vaccine production and supply, but our country still faces several challenges under the current situation of realignment of global supply chains. So in this regard, I think the Korea should focus on establishing and improving its domestic vaccine supply chain, leveraging its competitiveness in vaccine production and supply. The second point is that leveraging its established expertise and experience in vaccine supply chain development, Korea should play a key role in contributing to the production and supply of COVID-19 or any future pandemic vaccines, while also supporting the enhancement of supply chains and infrastructure in developing countries. Furthermore, I hope and I think Korea should strive for a leadership role in enhancing global vaccine acceptability through active international cooperation. So it is also necessary to aim for a leading role in improving global vaccine acceptability. Okay, I'm done. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim. I think she needs more time. She provided, context for global health security, provide some concepts, clarified, and vaccine supply chains as well, and some key challenges to vaccine supply chains, and provide two recommendations for Korea. So I think we will discuss this issue in the later discussion session. Next is Professor Kim Taekyoon.
I'm very. It's very great honor for me to be part of today very important workshop. So I should be humble because I'm not an expert on the health security or the global supply chain for the vaccine, but I'm trying to do from the perspective of Global South, what kind of competition or the complementarity, particularly between India and China. I mean, when it comes to what kind of the global supply chain for vaccine, the production as well as distribution in the longer term. So today I'm going to talk about some global South challenge to the current landscape of global health security, especially China and India. How different those two, the vaccine providers from the global South is quite different or similar, and how we can build up together to make some kind of our future roadmap for better, I think, the governance for the health security. So I'm going to finish up because everyone is very getting hungry, and the last speaker today. So I'm going to finish up my presentation in 15 minutes, less than that. Okay, so first of all, it's kind of introductions, the global pandemic and vaccine inequality and competition for global supply chains. I think that everyone just well understand what's going on, especially during or after corona pandemic. So I'm not going to go in detail, but one thing I'm going to highlight for the first slide is the global health governance did not work, especially the WHO. So that's why there are lots of criticism from the US and other, the G7 about the activities or the preparedness of the WHO in dealing with the COVID-19 at the time. But we have some kind of global efforts to tackle infectious disease and vaccine production. So there are many examples like the CEPI and the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovations. And COVAX is very well known, like the international initiative, and finally the COVID-19 vaccine delivery partnership launched in January last year. But having said that, I think the more important point we have to analyze what is the weaknesses of the global supply chain for health security. That's how many countries now can produce by themselves. So I think the 30 states take the lead of the COVID-19 vaccine production. Through the three different kinds of methods. So first one is in short, the CDMO, the Contract Development Manufacturing Organization, and its own facility, and finally technology transfer. So I think the CDMO is a kind of outsourced mechanism. So if you take the CDMO as the main method for the production and manufacturing, you need a partner. You need some other, kind of manufacturing companies or the other states. But if you take its own facility, you now have the kind of the national facility to produce. So it's a very powerful mechanism. So if you look at the Global South, only two countries now have, their own facility. That's India and China. So that's why I'm going to take a look at the India and China in more detail and how they're competing with each other by using its own facility. So if you look at the map, there's a geographical location of vaccine production by type of manufacturer. So the dark blue is like the own facility, and bright blue is CDMO, and then the yellow color is technology transfer. So if you look at the Global South, all nations have some kind of technology transfer rather than CDMO, rather than its own facility. Only two countries, that's China and India. That's why we have to pay attention to those two countries, what kind of mechanism, what kind of strategies they have to support all some kind of negate the current state of the global supply chain. And then if you look at the next, the chart, it is the top 10 vaccine production location, time number of the manufacturers. So number one is US. US also has its own facilities, and Germany has just only one facility. But if you look at India, 3 facilities they have, and China is 6. I think the number of the facilities, national facilities, I think China is number 1. So that's why China has relatively speaking, from my personal view, very powerful, and then they have very high level of influence by producing the vaccines, and they can be distributing vaccines for their own purpose, for their own sake, over the global south. So maybe we can just integrate all the activities of India and China by using vaccine. There is a vaccine diplomacy. So the vaccine diplomacy of China and India probably aim to improve its own diplomatic influences or relationships to target countries by using vaccines. So we have to analyze what kind of patterns of vaccine diplomacy and its effects on supply chain resilience differentiated across China and India. So that's why the first case is China. We can just highlight the key characteristics of Chinese vaccine diplomacy. I can say like own facility-centered vaccine diplomacy. So I'm not going into the detail, but the first, the point I would like to highlight, that's the vaccine. Chinese vaccine diplomacy built on the cornerstones, very big, like their own kind of discourses, and then the grand strategies, such as Xi Jinping's 3 Gs, the Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, Global Civilization Initiative, and also has the Silk Road that's part of the BRI. And then also already the first speaker highlighted, China is categorized the vaccine supply chain is like the public goods. So it could be used for their own purpose as well as the common goals of the humanities. So 8 vaccines are now currently approved by China. So it's now producing the 8 different vaccines, also distributing those vaccines over the global south. I think the 2 points we have to highlight and remember in the case of China's vaccine diplomacy, that first one is the bilateral, and second is its own facility-based, centered production line they have. So very powerful in a sense. It's not rather than the multilateral, they focus on bilateral relationship, and also they can using like the grand strategies such as the BRI by distributing what kind of the criteria they distributing the vaccines. First of all, the global something. I mean the 3G Global Development Initiative and other initiatives, as well as the BRI, and also they can just manufacture their own vaccine through its own companies, its own facilities. So if you look at the next slide here, this is the so-called Brandt line. This line is like distinction between the global north and global south. They're made by Willy Brandt back in 1980, the former chancellor of the West Germany, Willy Brandt. He made this kind of line and still available. So let me wrap up the China case. Maybe 3 key characteristics. First one, producing vaccine through their own facilities. Second, bilateral distribution rather than a multilateral distribution. And third one, vaccines as global public goods, as well as the good instrument for China's grand strategy. And the next slide is like the BRI, along with the vaccine distribution. So you can just recognize some of the key hub partner countries through, along with the BRI, and there's some focusing area for the distribution of the vaccines also is very closely connected to BRI. Okay, and the next one is India. So I'll just summarize the India case as the mixed bag of the CDMO and own facility. So CDMO means, once again, outsourced. So India has some of the key partner countries or the manufacturing the companies in the West. And also they highlight all the power and then the function of its own facilities as well at the same time. So as well known, India is among the world's largest pharmaceutical manufacturers, almost like 6% of the world vaccines by volume. And then they have very close relationship with the AstraZeneca and Oxford University. So they are very smartly using some CDMO mechanism, as well as they participate in the COVAX, multilateral, the initiative, as well as they just using some in the bottom, the last point of the slide, Bharat, the biotech, that's the national facility. So they just increase like the volumes and then some good vaccines through its own company, its own facility production line. So let me highlight some of the key points in the case of India by using this slide. So once again, the three key characteristics in the case of India's the vaccine supply chain. Firstly, producing vaccine through the CDMO and on its own the facility. So it's kind of mixed bag. So they have some connection with the West and the connection with the national industry. And then another one is the neighborhood first policy. So they focus on the neighboring countries first. So when it comes to how they distribute their vaccines, so Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, some of the South Asian countries as well as Southeast Asia, and then they extend it further to the African countries. So it's a little bit different like strategies they have in comparison with the China's vaccine diplomacy. So the key question, I think that we can raise this kind of question: China and India complementary or competing? So far we cannot judge those two countries now competing with each other or complementary with each other. It's quite we need more time to take a look at what kind of relation between two. But the obvious thing is like they have different strategies and they have different, I think, the national interest in the making or expanding some national strategy for the vaccine diplomacy. So I think the last point I'm going to highlight, even though the China and India differ in their strategies and tactics, they do operate in the same region, just like in the Pacific. Their vaccine diplomacy can intersect with the other dimensions, particularly where they are more competitive or even confrontational. So in the Pacific area, it's kind of common area. They put lots of the vaccines in order to make all the sustain the hegemonic power over the global South. Probably some kind of confrontation we can expect between two different countries by using the vaccine diplomacy. So 2 more slides. So just in time versus just in case. It's not my story. It is an article published by the Foreign Policy early of this year. Just in time supply chain model is kind of current set of the supply chain model globally. So the meaning is like this approach prioritize the supply chain efficiency through cost cutting and waste reduction measures, encouraging suppliers to eliminate redundancy and replenish inventory only when reserves were low. But when we just think of the global South, how we can supply the vaccines for the global South, maybe through the China or through the India or through the whole global governance, health governance, we have to change, we have to reform the current status of the just-in-time supply chain into the just-in-case supply chain. That's the key message from that article. So the meaning is just-in-case approach. We need more resilient to price the volatility and the geopolitical instability and climate-related disruptions by maintaining stockpiles of the critical medicines or raw materials. So in advance, we can just maintain stockpiles for the case of the crisis or the instability. So it is quite the important kind of the model, but the thing is how we can just put together different supply chain into one single integrate, the supply chain. So it's a very hard thing. So especially for the case of the low and middle income countries, they have many different the factors for the making the supply chain very fluctuated or unstable because of the undeveloped transportation networks and shortage of skilled labor and so on. So just in case supply, how we can prepare together for the the stockpiles of the critical medicines raw materials. So that is the kind of our future roadmap. But the thing is the last slide, how to strengthen the supply chain resilience to safeguard the health in the global South. So there is no answer, for now, because my job is a very preliminary research on the general kind of view of global supply chain in the case of the India and China, and then over the global South. But the thing is, one thing I can just draw some kind of from my presentation, that is proactively embracing India as a hub of connectivity with the global South, as well as the global North. I think India is kind of the only country in the global South to connect both sides, the global South and global North at the same time. So how South Korea approached the India as key partner, especially for the purpose of the enhancing the collaborative partnership with Global North and Global South all together. So once again, I don't have any idea, very critical, the good answer for that question, but probably the India should be differently treated by the South Korea or other G7 countries as a key partner for the better, I think, the set of the global supply chain. Thank you.
Very much, Professor Kim Taekyoon. Takes two big countries, India and China, as cases to provide their strategies, compare and contrast, and then the relationship between the two in vaccine diplomacy may be largely competitive rather than complementary. And he closed by providing some policy implications for South Korea. Now let's turn to discussion, but we only have 30 minutes. So please confine your discussion to 8 minutes, please. And this is a designated discussion, so Professor Kang to Dr. Huang in this way. So, yes.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this conference. I am very honored to take part in this conference. My job in this session is to make comments on Dr. Huang's presentation. Dr. Huang's presentation helped us understand the current state of health security, which has been driven or under the influence of the US-China competition and China's domestic politics. And I believe he cautiously forecast a neutral or slightly pessimistic future of health security, given the direction of the US-China competition is likely to head. I largely agree with Dr. Huang regarding the past, present, and the future of health security. Nevertheless, I'd like to fulfill my role as a discussant by adding a few things to Dr. Huang's presentation, especially the causes of the health insecurity and the world experienced during the COVID-19 pandemic and how they will relate to health security in the future. We can find the causes of the COVID-19 pandemic at two dimensions. The first dimension is the virus itself, or the medical dimension. The COVID-19 virus was new and its pathology was unknown. However, given the fact that COVID-19 vaccines were developed quickly within a year, which was 1/10 of the usual time required to develop a vaccine, the virus itself didn't seem to be the most significant cause of the pandemic and health insecurity. The state of medicine in 2020 was sufficiently advanced that it was able to tackle the new virus. Thus, the novelty of the COVID-19 was not a sufficient condition for it to become a pandemic. The real significant cause of the pandemic lay somewhere else and was more significant for the pandemic than the novelty of the COVID-19 virus. The COVID-19 became a pandemic because of politics, which is the second dimension of the pandemic. The pandemic behind the COVID-19 pandemic politics behind the COVID-19 pandemic had a few sources. The United States, US-China competition was not the only politics involved. The pandemic broke out because of failure in disease surveillance. Without functioning surveillance systems and robust information sharing among countries, a novel virus can easily become a pandemic in the age of globalization. Failure in disease surveillance and information sharing is largely driven by domestic politics in the country where a new virus starts. This was well shown by China. The second source of politics behind the COVID-19 pandemic was the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization lacks meaningful enforcement mechanisms needed to assure compliance with the directives upon a pandemic outbreak. And the World Health Organization falls at the whim of member states. This was well shown too by its delicate and diplomatic dealings with China in the wake of the pandemic. So the COVID-19 virus became a pandemic because the three kinds of politics were compounded. Seeing that politics matters more for health security than the novelty of virus, we can assess the future of health security more realistically. At one time, health-related collaborations were viewed as politically acceptable and shielded from politics. But the panic and confusion around COVID-19 upended this tradition. In the era of great power competition, it becomes difficult to prepare for or respond to future pandemics. If competition between the United States and China continues and neither China nor the United States provides clear opportunities for collaboration, the chances of tackling new pandemics will be diminished. However, advancing health security often falls beyond the purview of any single country. Multinational partnerships are required. Specifically, they underscores the importance of continued engagement by two of the world's greatest economic and technological powers, as well as the need to find ways to continue collaborations in smart, informed, geopolitically sensitive, and mutually beneficial manners. To build collaboration between the United States and China, there are two needs upon which to focus. A more nuanced narrative regarding the United States and China relations, and a clear set of collaborative endeavors. Most importantly, the narrative must make plain that U.S.-China relations in health are not part of a zero-sum game, where one side wins and the other loses. In thinking about global public health, mutual self-interest in Washington and Beijing can drive progress. On areas of trans-border health issues, it is possible to build for the United States and China. It is possible for the United States and China to build partnerships that run complementary, even if they have different or opposite political systems and ideologies. The health problems confronting the humanity demands that the United States and China work together, even only in this limited context. And lastly, it is critical to emphasize mission-driven collaboration between the United States and China. Okay, this says the joint initiatives possible that are clear in their global health goals, not related to national security and detached from politics at home. They include agreements for exchange of data and information that are shaped and managed in a way that both countries might accept. For instance, on the pandemic early warning systems, or collaboration in the case of a third country humanitarian responses, such as the cooperation during the West Africa Ebola epidemic in 2015, I guess. Thank you for your listening.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. So I think we'll talk about Professor Sun Young-kim's discussion about the perspective and challenges for Korea from the global health security perspective. I think she gave a great summary about what's the global health security, and also vaccines are public goods. And she emphasized the Korea need to have a domestic production for global supply chain, and also its need to having the supporting the infrastructure of the LMIC, something like that. So I think I'm not actually in this area, in this field, so I think this I'm here learning a lot of new point of view
viewing the vaccine supply chain because I'm developing vaccine by myself in the laboratory. So many of the IVI scientists who are dealing with these inequity issues, they are now in Rwanda because now in Africa, many low-income countries, they wanted to develop their own vaccine. So I think many IVI scientists are now helping in Africa, and also IVI decide to make an African vaccine initiative to help their own vaccine development. So most of the experts and scientists are now staying in Africa. So today I'm talking about our experience during the COVID and how we Korea have experienced, and what's the new plan for how can I say contributing for the global public health, and also especially in vaccine manufacturing from the LMICs. Actually, during the COVID, as you remember, Korea also mostly we imported the vaccine for which we need, from Moderna or Pfizer or Novavax, something like that. But Korea also produced, as Professor Taekyoon mentioned, like a CDMO or CMO production, AstraZeneca or Novavax or Samsung, also the fill and finish for Moderna vaccine. So, and also we exported a lot of vaccines, AstraZeneca, Novavax, because as I remember, more than 100 million doses Korea also exported because our capacity was quite enough to mass production. So I think we also contributed that. And also, you remember, Korea also make a success, our own vaccines. It's SK Bioscience. So this vaccine, it's through the global collaboration, Gates Foundation and CEPI and GSK. Also, the vaccine come from Washington University. So that vaccine, as a first vaccine, as I remember, as a Korean vaccine, after got MFDS approval, they got UK MHRA approval, and then finally also they got WHO EUL so authorized. So we quite successfully developed our own vaccine, but unfortunately this one is a recombinant protein vaccine, and how can I say, a little bit delayed compared to the other messenger RNA vaccine. So it's not in our supply right now. But anyway, so I think Korea actually quite very strongly wanted to develop our own vaccine. I think it started year 2010. You remember there are pandemic influenza. At the time, Korea Minister of Health and Welfare, he traveled to secure the vaccine, influenza vaccine, but unfortunately, he cannot get a single dose of vaccine because at the time, vaccine nationalism was really serious. So I think from that time, Korea decided, okay, vaccine is not just economic. Vaccine is a self-independence. I mean, it's a sovereignty issues. So from that time, Korea government very strongly decided to develop our own vaccine inside Korea. I think at the time, only 20% of vaccine were produced in Korea, which we are using. So that time, government decided up to 80% we need to produce inside Korea. So at the time, from that time, I think a huge amount of money at the vaccine field start to support it. As I remember, $200 million for research money from MOHW, and also almost same amount of money from Minister Moti, Minister of Industry, for building GMP facilities, especially vaccines, Andong and Hwasun, for bacteria or cell-based vaccines, and many other activities. So they want to support vaccine production in Korea. I think that also we benefit during this corona pandemic. And also Korea, I think we are very strong in mass production. As you know, monoclonal antibodies in globally, Korea one of the top countries like Samsung Biologics and Celltrion, they are producing like a huge amount of monoclonal antibodies. So it's biosimilar. Korea, in very short time, became very strong, in mass production globally. So we are very strong on the in mass production, but unfortunately, the vaccine design and vaccine develop itself, we are quite behind compared to the USA or the many developed countries. So I think we need to also focus on that kind of vaccine design or structural vaccinology or more advanced technology, because we already having mass production systems because many private sectors they start investment. And also, I think Korea also during the COVID and through the COVID, we realized we can also support LMIC countries. So together with the MOHW and WHO, Korea government started the GTHB program, Global Training Hub of Biomanufacturing. I think WHO also started the WHO messenger RNA training hub, because really many LMIC countries, this time, they really want to produce a vaccine by themselves. I think global supply chain is very important, but also LMIC, they didn't receive the vaccine on time. So really many people died because of they cannot have the vaccine. So this time they are very serious. So I think I traveled to many countries and they started their own vaccine development facility using the messenger RNA, something like this. So, and many advanced country and commercial and Gates Foundation and WHO, they start helping. Also IBI also participating that kind of self-development activities. So actually, IBI, we had a vaccinology course every year. Normally, it's we have like 100 audience, but during the COVID, we cannot have that program because of this COVID. They banned all the travel. So we opened that program in online. I think it was year 2001. Normally 100, but at the time, globally, more than 7,000 people applied the program, and around 30,000 program, they finished the program quite well. So I think we discussed this kind of in Sweden developing vaccine by themselves and having training program. So together with MOHW, Korea launched the program. I think it's already 2 years, and more than 100 and 300 from the LMICs, they are trained in Korea. I think now in Seung SNU campus, they are training for vaccinology course and also GXP course, including GMP. I think Korea government will extend this program to global bio campus. So they'll having the mock GMP facility, and they're also training 100 people over there. So I think Korea government wanted to contribute by training in globally that kind of from LMICs. I think that's all.
Thank you very much for having me today. Actually, I got my cold, so that please just understand my kind of sort of bad voice condition. Okay, actually, I'm not an expert of the health security and global health issue. However, I actually learned a lot about this global health issue, particularly the supply chain, particularly the vaccine supply chain. So as I actually designated my discontent from the Professor Kim Taekyoon, but also I actually learned a lot from the Professor Huang's comment and the point about this, what kind of the position that China actually have in case of the vaccine supply chain issue, as well as the Professor Kim Shen-young actually provided a lot of the overview, very generous of the overview about this, why the vaccine supply chain actually differentiated from the traditional supply chain. I actually have several, how to say this, question, slides, the comment regarding the vaccine supply chain issue. The first of when actually I read this article from the Professor Kim Taekyoon, I already actually think about vaccine diplomacy as well as the vaccine nationalism. A lot of people already very much familiar with the vaccine diplomacy as well as the vaccine nationalism. Even the 2020 and 2021, I believe a lot of people very much criticized about the vaccine nationalism as well as more like a very aggressive the activity from the vaccine diplomacy in somehow negative portion. However, nowadays, right here, right this moment, I think that the vaccine diplomacy as well as the vaccine nationalism is more like, how to say, just a common situation, right? So in this case, my first question, Okay, based on this vaccine nationalism as well as the vaccine diplomacy is becoming much more the common phenomena. And then how we are going to distribute this vaccine, but more equitable vaccine distribution. In other words, the more equitable vaccine distribution is possible under the vaccine diplomacy is very much inactive, as well as the vaccine nationalism is kind of sort of the common situation right here, right this moment. The second situation is here. So, okay, right here, this China and India became more and more influential stakeholder, not only developed the vaccine, but also distribution of the vaccine in global scale. In this case, my second question is, can China and India create or exert some kind of the solidarity linkage with the global south? Because the global south, it cannot be the homogeneous group. Global South could be the heterogeneous group, and within Global South, there are tons of different types of the Global South is a country. Their individual Global South country has a different types of the needed. So how in the world we are going to create in some kind of the AKA global solidarity within this Global South? Because whenever we talk about the global solidarity, we always talk about the Global North and Global South's solidarity. But what about the Global South's solidarity? Because we always assume Global South always have their own Global South spirit, and without any big question, Global South could be somehow, how to say, just one voice or the unified voice in the international society, which is not true, because the Professor Kim Taekyoon already mentioned about the China and India had very much different strategy on the implementing their own the vaccine diplomacy, as well as the vaccine development or the other types of strategy in order to expand their own influence through this vaccine issue. So in this case, my third question is, I think that this is more like the fundamental question. Can vaccine and vaccine supply chain be a global, the public good or private good with special needs? I believe everybody just assume the vaccine, particularly the COVID-19 vaccine, could be the global public good, but which is not quite sure about it, because the Professor Kang Sun-ju actually mentioned about this. So what's the major point of the public good, right? And the non-really as well as the non-exclusion. But when you actually look at this, the vaccine development as well as the vaccine supply chain, you cannot say. So still there are a lot of somehow competition among these very influential pharmaceutical and the international pharmaceutical within this realm of the vaccine distribution as well as the vaccine development. Also at the same time, non-exclusion meaning that if we actually look more like closely into the vaccine supply chain, you cannot say that this is a whole the non-exclusion. The principle can be solely applied into vaccine supply chain. So in that case, can we actually talk about this vaccine as the public good and global public good? The reason why I should make this final question, because I believe this is going to be the fundamental question, whether we are going to develop our vaccine supply chain in much more modified way or the much more improved way for the better quality of the global health care or the global health security. So without the question's answer, I think that our whole conversation is somehow kind of sort of hitting around the bush in case of the big gap between global north and global south. So I would like to actually raise the one final question. Can we consider the vaccine and vaccine supply chain be a global public good, or can we consider this vaccine, particularly in the future, any types of the vaccine could be a private good with special needed? Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I think before getting back to presenters, let me host one or two questions from the floor. Quick question.
영어 부족해서 한국말로 하겠습니다. 저는 한국도시재생연구원의 김정현입니다. 김태균 교수님께 여쭙겠습니다. 코로나 발원지자 그 후로 이제 백신 개발을 했는데 우리나라를 중심으로 해서 세계는 인정하지 않습니다. 별로 신뢰감이 없다는 거죠, 이제. 그런데 아까 이제 발표 지도를 보면은 대다수 국가들이 미국 내지는 유럽은 빼고 대다수 국가들이 중국에서 만든 백신들을 이렇게 신뢰하고 사용하고 있는 걸로 파악하고 있습니다. 제가 드리고 싶은 것은 저도 이제 중국에 대한 관심이 많다 보니까 현재 그 백신을 개발한 사람은 중국의 그 천웨이라는 그분이 개발을 해서 지금까지 많은 아까 발표한 그 나라에 공급을 하고 신뢰감을 했다고 생각합니다. 그래서 상당히 김태균 교수님은 긍정적으로 지금 생각하고 있는 걸로 내가 파악하고 있습니다. 그래서 지금 가장 중요한 것은 이제는 우리가 이제 구체정치 상황에서 본다면은 늘 보건 분야나 어떤 분야나 가릴 것 없이 미국이나 중국을 중심으로 해서 친구와 적으로 만들고 있는 상황이 좀 안타깝습니다. 그래서 혹시 그 천회에 대해서 중국에 그분하고 어떤 소통하고 있는지 한번 여쭤보고 싶습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
네, 고맙습니다. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we are almost time, so I think you could anyone can respond. Maybe Professor Kim Tae-kyun, you should respond to several questions. So before you preparing for that, Dr. Huang, would you want to respond?
Well, sure. I'd like to comment the vaccine developed by General Chen Wei. That we know that based on the Chinese media reports, she seems to be the first to develop a effective COVID vaccine. That was in a way even earlier than the U.S. But my understanding that the vaccine once developed was first used in the Chinese military. We don't know how the vaccine rate, the vaccination rate was, and how effective it was. It's seems to be a top secret and never being revealed by the government. But we do know that later, that vaccine was never widely used in China. Because the vaccine she developed was the adenovirus vaccine, not the inactivated vaccine developed by Sinovac or the Sinopharm. So that is still pretty much a mystery. Why is that the case? Even though that the government also give her a lot of awards, making himself sort of like a national hero. But ironically, that vaccine has never been widely used in China. It's never. In a way, it's not even the designated vaccine in the country during the campaign.
Thank you for all the comments. Very helpful. As I already mentioned, the today presentation is based upon the very preliminary, the kind of sketch about the India and China's the vaccine diplomacy. So very helpful. So thank you. So I think your question from the audience already answered by Dr. Huang. So thank you for Dr. Huang. And then I didn't, the support the Chinese vaccines is very effective and useful the cases for COVID-19, because just take a look at my paper. I just lay out all 8 different the vaccines used by the Chinese government, and the very few number of the countries use those doses. So it's very, very negative, I guess, the response from the recipient country in the global south as well. So please refer to that. And then some of the responses from to the Professor Chang's comment especially the second question, can China and India create some kind of the global solidarity with the global South? In my understanding, after the end of Cold War, there is no any genuine kind of pattern of solidarity among global South countries. So after that, they just follow kind of the national interest like calculations for their own survivors. So they can easily support with the U.S. at the same time with China and India. So I think the global solidarity or global South solidarity consideration is kind of the political rhetoric. So that's why they very rigorously calculate the losses and gains in relation to some the providers of India and China. So to the second question, I'm very negative position. And then the last one, the global public goods. It is a very important question to global governance as well as the United Nations. So back in 1990s, United Nations, they had a big project how to define what is the global public goods. It's not domestic public goods. So the non-exclusivity, non-competition, and so on, that's kind of the key component of the national public goods. But at the global level, we cannot apply those two components to the public goods at the global level. So UN just officially declared, if just satisfy one kind of component against the other, we can call global public good. So probably there's some different definition we have to use for understanding, the vaccine supply chain can be, understood as, global public goods. But in theory, it's impossible, I guess. But in reality, we can do some kind of the one integrated kind of channel for the global supply for vaccines. Sometimes using the India connectivity, and also the Chinese production line. But the thing is, how we can make kind of consensus. I already talked about Dr. Huang, touch on the global consensus on the future kind of collaboration among some of the stakeholders in the making and the implementing and distributing the vaccines for the global agenda. So I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are over time, so let me conclude. But I don't really think that I need to. I need a conclusion. But one thing, compared to other three topics that we are dealing with in this conference, this public health issue seems relatively easier to cooperate than other things. Unfortunately, this issue really needs an international cooperation, but it happened at a time when we really need, but we were split and fractured. This is, that past 3 years, could be a lesson for the global community, and maybe the next round comes, then we might be better prepared than before. So even in the case of U.S.-China strategic competition, Dr. Huang, you correctly mentioned that this issue was not mentioned at all, but this is, I think, one of the better areas where two great powers plus other countries, would be able to cooperate. So with that, let me conclude. And so today's session conference ended. And we will have a conference tomorrow as well. We had 2 more sessions to go, so please come back again. Thank you very much.